Okay.
It's showtime.
Hello,
We're live, Ellie.
hello. How are you?
Good. Anything else you want to say to introduce us?
Yeah,
just
welcome
chat?
to the show. Hi, Cliff. This is Cliff, and I'm Ellie, and we're going to chat about all the people that are near and dear to our hearts in the Epstein files and in the news and in politics. None of them are doing anything wrong. They're all very filled with integrity, feet on the ground, kind, good people who only look for the best in the world. So we thought we would just get on here and have a Mr. Rogers style show about all the good happening in the news today.
That's a hell of an intro. I love that, Ellie. I mean, especially from you. I mean, you're a good Montana salt of the earth kind of gal. You were just out there doing some mining, doing some forestry work, some fly fishing, some trucking, what else have I seen in Yellowstone? So I
know, yeah. I was hanging with Kevin Costner. Yes.
Exactly. You were fighting against various groups that wanted to take over your land. One was a big corporate group from New York. Another were Native Americans rightly pissed off that you stole it 7 generations ago.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember who else you were fighting. I'm sure there were more.
We used to laugh because all the crew would come out because they filmed like couple miles from our house, and so they would fill up all the hotels, which there were like 2, and they would go hiking, and everybody knew who they were because they just looked so uncomfortable and so out of place on the trail. It looked like they had just gone to REI and bought all their Patagonia gear for this one hike. And and there was always there's always helicopters going around, but everybody loved it. It was pretty great.
I mean, yeah, right, the positives and negatives. I think I met you originally. Well, we met a number of ways, but you being the outgoing sort that you are, and my being shy, it was much more you.
Yes.
I'm kidding. No, I think I mentioned that I'd seen, I met when I was like 1 or 2, Robert Redford, because in where I grew up, they were filming part of 3 Days of the Condor, which, by the way, if you've never seen, folks, is one of the all-time great movies. And Ellie was like, well, you New York boy think you're so special. I got to meet Robert Redford too because he filmed that Brad Pitt fly fishing movie right here. The river runs through. We all remember that one. That was a good movie.
We walked. I think I was very little when that came out. So we walked on. I didn't get to meet him. I just remember seeing him, and I don't think I knew who he was, but we were, as you do in the summer in Montana, we were just sort of driving around doing road trips, whatever. And, we walked across a number of sets because that's everybody films in Montana in the summertime. And so we walked onto the set of A River Runs Through It, and they were like, get off the set. And I remember seeing him, and he was wearing all black, like a sweatsuit, and it was 100 degrees in the summertime. And I remember thinking, I don't know who that guy is, but he's an idiot. Why would you dress like that in Montana in the summertime?
A jackass.
I know. And then I learned he was Robert Redford.
So he was kind of important. Yeah, I can't claim to remember at all. I mean, I think they were filming it when I was somewhere between 1 and 2. I've just been told the stories of that he was being nice to everybody, and my parents brought me up, and he was like, "Oh, baby," and whatever. No memories, but that's how Yeah,
I was gonna say they filmed Wyatt Earp, that last closing scene of Wyatt Earp when he's in Alaska. They filmed that out where I grew up, and so everybody in town was an extra. That was like the big deal. Everybody's dad was in the movie. And I couldn't be because they had too many kids, and I had like a pixie cut, and they wouldn't let me be in it. But my mother-in-law's claim to fame is that
was she on the boat?
Well, she wasn't in it, but she saw him at the laundromat, and he kissed her on the cheek. So that's her big moment. So there you go.
Wow, that's cool. I was talking about the movie itself, because I remember I think Tombstone was a little bit better, but being a history fan, being a history kind of guy, like I see all those movies a million times because,
didn't they kill somebody in Tombstone? They killed one of the Earp brothers that didn't actually ever die. See, I was a big Earp history buff as a kid.
Were you?
Die? Oh yeah.
Yeah, the youngest one, the youngest brother. I thought he was killed. Like the oldest brother.
There was one killed across a pool table.
Yes,
there was one killed in the.
And
then there was one killed in the OK Corral, and then Wyatt Earp was never killed.
Wyatt Earp actually was a legend because there was the whole Jesus myth, because he was never touched by a bullet. And like he
Yeah.
got up times and would just start walking towards them, and they were hiding, shooting them, and like no one could seem to ever hit him.
Yeah, I could have a whole like live stream and Substack based on this part of history because my
When are we
grandpa had all the
geeking out
coffee
on this
table
and
books.
doing a show? Seriously, like I've been to
I
Tombstone.
had all the coffee table books. I had all those,
Yep.
those like brown leather Time magazine books on history. You can find them in thrift shops now. I read all those. I had all the books where they would have photographs of dead people propped up in store windows. Like I just ate that stuff up as a kid.
Oh, me too.
My parents were fine with it. They were, they were just like, yeah,
You
whatever.
lived
Read
out
history.
west. Why would you not be
Yeah,
into that?
yeah. I loved all that stuff.
So I've got like family that lives in Tucson, so they're not, within an hour of Tombstone. So I've just gone there, saw the whole reenactment, all that fun stuff, and everything, and that made me, history, and that made me interested. But also, interesting story here. One of the reasons I learned all about it was the political work I did, because when I would argue with, let's call them fundamentally dishonest pre-MAGA losers who would try to claim the Second Amendment said something and entirely didn't say, which is anybody can carry a gun at any time, anywhere for personal protection. I was like, well, that's funny, because the whole reason the OK Corral shooting happened was they went to disarm them. And the reason they went to disarm what were their names? Disarm the
the brothers. I forget
yes.
what their names are too, but yeah, big group of brothers.
They went to disarm them because guess what, folks? Guns were not allowed at all in the town of Tombstone. You had to check your gun when you walked in, showing that at a different time, the Supreme Court of the United States and others interpreted the Second Amendment as it was actually written, a well-regulated militia. Not every asshole gets to carry a gun whenever they feel like it. And they were smart enough, unlike so many, sadly, mostly Midwestern and Southern states, I live in one of them these days, to not get that if you actually want business to transpire, not having people drinking with guns is a good idea. So they thought, well, we would like them to gamble, and we would like them to utilize the services of our prostitutes. I'm not saying I'm for that. I'm just telling, and
Big Nose Kate.
That's right, Big Nose Kate. And they're drinking and they're out of their skulls and they have guns. They're guys and we're dumb. There's testosterone and booze mixing together, and they'll shoot each other. So that's what they were actually doing, was disarming them, because the town of Tombstone, like many others, banned guns because you were allowed to do that, and you should be still allowed to do that, because the Second Amendment has absolutely zero to do with personal protection. It's about a militia in the country.
So it's interesting. So I'm one of those kids whose parents like pulled them out of health class because they thought it was like morally bad to hear about, people having sex or whatever in the 8th grade. I read Lonesome Dove 3 times in the 5th grade. Like I learned all my my health history and everything from reading like Larry McMurtry books as a young child, because I just ate them up under my covers at night with a flashlight. But between
clearly
that,
you learned something, Ellie. I don't want to get too personal here, but you have 4 kids, so you must have learned something.
But then my favorite movie was Maverick, the Mel Gibson version of Maverick. But there's a scene at the end of that movie, and I don't know if you're familiar with that movie. I've seen it 100 times.
Am familiar. I've seen it a bunch.
Okay.
Before I started.
There's a scene at the end of that movie that just reminds me, it's like a metaphor of the state of the world. So it's kind of like what you're saying. So they're going on this gambling paddle wheeler. The rule is nobody can have a gun, right? That you come in, everybody's spending all their money. They're kind of like the equivalent of modern day millionaires that are just spending these big like piles of cash. Nobody's supposed to have a gun. You're supposed to hand it over when you get in. At the end, there's this giant shootout, and I think it was James Garner. He's like, damn it, everybody's got a gun.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, we had this rule, we had this law, but you know what? Everybody still had a gun. Like nobody actually followed it. And I was just like, man, that is such a metaphor for like all the mass shootings that we have. It's like, yeah, we have these really nice rules in place about, concealed carry and blah, 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 blah. But it's like, if you want the guns that your state doesn't allow, you just like, tiptoe over to the next state over and go get it.
That's the problem. That's why, like, I don't want this to get off on a topic I've spent lots of time on gun control, safety, whatever you'd like to call it. But this is one of the reasons why, when I've spoken about this in the past, and it's always that, of course, you have certain states. Montana would be different than New York to a certain degree, right? But you have to have a baseline that all the states have to follow. If you think assault weapons are too deadly for humans to have, and I do, then they should be banned
Yeah.
everywhere. And if you think that there need to be universal background checks, they need to be everywhere, because all it takes is the dumbest state to screw the rest of us. People can actually drive across state lines unless you're going to put metal detectors on state lines. And the proof I always used of how it's obvious that these laws work and that people are bringing them from other states is we have this state known as Hawaii, and you can't drive to Hawaii. You can't just take your guns there. And they have one of the lowest rates of gun ownership and one of the lowest rates of gun violence, because you can't, there are laws.
You look at these mass shootings that happen in states that do have stricter gun laws, and people go, oh, haha, they can still happen in those states. And you look at where you can statistically find maps of where the guns were sourced for those and all they did is hop over to Nevada or hop over to a state that had no gun laws. They got the gun, they didn't do the background check, they weren't required to have any sort of paperwork, and then they just drive it back over the border and they go shoot up somebody in a state that has strict gun laws. So it doesn't, it's so easy for somebody, if they're motivated, to get a gun, because it's not it's not like these people are licensed for the guns that they're using. Like when a kid goes into their school and shoots up their school, they're not like, oh, I'm going to apply for a gun license. They're not doing that. They're just grabbing it from somebody else. And so, yes, exactly. And the argument coming from a hunting state, the argument that you need assault rifles because you're a hunting state is ridiculous.
You're a really shitty hunter if you need
ridiculous. Here's the deal with hunting. If you shoot a deer with an assault rifle, you will not get the meat. The meat will spoil. You cannot eat it. So that's ridiculous. The idea of having, people that I know near and dear to me having these giant gun safes in their house, and it's like, are you really somebody comes in your bedroom at night, are you like, hold on, let me type in the code and grab my assault rifle out of my gun safe? There's conversations that people just don't want to have about the logic of those types of weapons and how they don't serve a purpose. The only purpose that an assault rifle serves is killing a crowd of people versus a single person.
That's what it was made for. It was made to be on a battlefield to take out a large.
They are weapons of war. They're not necessary for protecting a family, right? If somebody's coming in your house, it's not an army. It is one or two. How many?
You're not going to spray all over the place with bullets.
You would kill everybody. Yes. So but it's a conversation where they go, well, it's all or nothing. You can't have one and then you can't have the other. And it's like, well, there are states that, again, coming from Montana, there are states that have gun laws. They could have better gun laws. But the states that are hunting states have really strict training laws about people who do want to hunt and do want to do things. And because they get it, and they do have low rates of gun violence because people really respect the weaponry and they use it to feed their families. And
it's
that's
a tool.
So
it's not like a tool.
It's
not like a penis extension. I'm sorry to put it that way.
No. And it's so I don't think people don't realize that nobody's trying to take away somebody's ability to feed their family sustainably. I have no problem with that. But they said it's just this argument that it's all or nothing. You either have it all or you don't have anything. And I don't think anybody has ever said that. But again, it's one of those things where they absolutely will not cross the line to talk to each other about it. And so here we are with mass shootings happening.
Well, there are people
in an outburger.
Right. There are people like today who profit from Trump's divisiveness. I'm sorry.
Yes.
What's going on? There's people that that wanted there to be this divisive issue, when the truth is there really isn't any divisiveness, because 90% of us think there should be universal background checks. You have a hard time finding 90% that support anything. So I mean, I can go into the weeds on this stuff because not only was it the biggest sort of issue and client I worked on every time for gun safety for many years, but I think I said to you before, I may have grown up in New York City, but I went to camp every summer and I shot competitively on a team.
Yeah.
So I was around guns. I understood them. One kid one time turned with a rifle towards the audience watching us, and the rifle wasn't loaded. He was kicked out of the gun range forever. Because what you're saying about education, they were very clear with us that these were weapons. They may have been tools, they're also weapons. They can kill people. You need to actually be careful. And so when I see places, I remember Ohio did at some point where they had some already ludicrous law, 8 hours on the range, and they lowered it to 6. And I'm like, You need hundreds. That's the dumbest. I
Yeah.
mean, again, if you want to the fact that you're giving people guns who spent 6 hours on a range and have no clue what they're doing, and so, you know, so that
no mental health backgrounds. That's the big thing. Like no mental health backgrounds. You know, because the number one area that they are used for is in domestic violence. Like if you have any kind of a background in that with abuse, like nothing is required. Like it feels very, very simple when you think of all the other areas where we are required to get a background check, to have something small, to drive a car. Why do we not have to have it to shoot a gun? Like it's
well,
cars
car is
don't
something else
always
that can be used for driving, and it can also kill
guns
a large
only shoot people or only
right.
shoot, right? That's the only thing they do, whereas cars are not mostly weapons. So yeah, it's a long conversation, but
It is. I'll just say the last thing. I mean, you brought up the cars. It's interesting. We had reached a point in the 70s where like our roadside, you know, road fatalities were horrific. And that is when they started the anti-drunk driving campaigns and checkpoints and holding bartenders accountable for serving people that are out of their skulls drunk. And the drinking age was raised to 21. And I mean, you can argue with or not argue with any of these things, but they basically said, you know, they enacted tougher speed limits. Like they basically were just like, we're going to attack it like a public health problem, which is what shooting guns are too. And realize that people need to use their cars and need to get places, whatever. And like, I think our traffic fatalities are down something like 70%. I mean, we could do the same thing with guns.
Super
Again,
simple.
Canada, Australia, people are allowed to have hunting rifles, and a bunch of those places people are allowed to have shotguns, allowed to have other.
Oh, but they have higher knife rates. And it's like, well, you can't throw a knife into a crowd of 30
I was just
people.
saying, next time you want to assassinate, let's say, a President Kennedy, try with a knife and, you know, from like up on top or whatever, and see how, I mean, their arguments are all dumb. They're just dumb. In any case, Tombstone, baby.
I blame Charlton Heston. Okay,
it is.
Moving on.
Dick. He was a liberal when he was younger, and he betrayed us. Okay. So, you know what? This, in a way, this is a sad, could be a sad segue to the Epstein class and current member Max Miller, who a lot of people know about, who not only seemingly, and again, this is alleged, so we don't know for sure, but allegedly broke his baby's collarbone, which makes me want to do really mean things to him that I can't say, but also threw scalding hot water on his wife, put a gun to her head again, didn't matter, whatever his previous record was, and he'd been accused by Stephanie Grisham at the White House, his former girlfriend when he worked at the White House, of abuse. He was still got a gun, no problem, and apparently put it to his wife's head while she was changing their baby. These are just some of the worst things he did. There are plenty of others. Another scumbag here in Ohio, married to Senator Bernie Moreno, who is a scumbag himself, to his daughter. Bernie Moreno barely beat Sherrod Brown in the last election. I mean, talk about a clown beating somebody who was an incredible senator, and I think will win this election. But it was a bad election, you know, in a number of states, and this was one of them. And Moreno, for 2 years, didn't say anything as Max Miller harmed his daughter, because apparently political power, these people are so sick that it's more important than your family. And finally, and I'm going to say it's because polling is now showing even though it's a +5 Republican district, his opponent, Poindexter, who was in the military, I want to say maybe high-ranking military guy, running against him, is now up 5 points, 44-39 in the very Republican district. And Max Miller's favorables, shockingly, after all of this press, are down to 25%. So Bernie Moreno made the calculation that he should now come out and excoriate this guy and say he needs psychological help.
It's gross.
Right. It's sickening.
Okay. So there was a conversation, and I could go down into the weeds about this, but a conversation about what it looks like when someone has a PR manager to help them speak on camera versus what it looks like when they're not. And when they don't have someone, usually it's a more organic, funny kind of silly, you know, whatever conversation, which I usually appreciate and can recognize. I think most women, at least, I'm sure men too, but like could look at this on camera, you know, statement from Max Miller and say, his PR guy is definitely a guy. right? This is not a woman who's like, I'm going to help write this speech for you, because it was so tone deaf, like
Oh my
so
God.
incredibly, like all it did was convince people who'd never heard of him was like, oh, he's an abuser. Like
Yep.
his body language, his tone, like the pulsing, veins at the side of his temples,
Yep.
like he's an abuser. And like you can see in the way he speaks, you can hear it in the recorded phone conversations. You're like, this is just a standard, typical textbook abuser.
Yes.
Like this is there's no question in my mind. People who don't abuse and who are accused of abuse approach things differently. They say, maybe I did something and I didn't realize it, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to figure this
Of
out,
course.
right? If you did it, you get on the air and you share all your recorded phone calls with the woman who's accusing you of abuse, and you try to explain why she's an idiot. You make her look crazy, you make her look hysterical, you make her look like she's lying. And statistically that works. I mean, if you look through, and like we think of the Epstein files, but like in my work history, I've been dealing with these types of cases since the beginning of time. Sometimes just local people we've never heard of, sometimes big cases like Woody Allen, Harvey Weinstein, that kind of thing. Statistically, and this is across most cultures too, women who cry abuse will lose their children to the abuser. Like more than 75% of the time. There's a lot of reasons for that, but there is this idea of the parental alienation syndrome, where women are coaching their children to say that their parents are abusing them. Like they've created this whole system that's based on men who usually have a higher income, who have better access to legal services, and have been on camera more, or have
Yep.
more of a name for themselves than the woman that they told to be a stay-at-home mother most of the time. So they have better access. So women who say, you've thrown hot boiling water on me, you have held a gun to my head, you've done this, this, and this, but I can't afford a good legal team. The only thing I'm going to get is going to be pro bono, whereas you are campaigning to be a congressperson. Like you have every kind of resource in the world. And even her own father is siding with the man who abused her. Like it's corrupt and it's terrible, but it's textbook, and it's been happening for centuries. It's really,
Yeah.
really frustrating. Yes, it's so frustrating, because almost every time, like, and even when you look back at like a case like Woody Allen and Mia Farrow, eventually they withdrew their case. And I will say this for the record, because a lot of people don't know this. They withdrew their case because it was decided for Dylan, the little girl who accused her father of abuse, that in order for her to have a semi-normal life, they were not going to put her up on the stand at 7 years old in front of her father and point her finger at her father, right? Because that would mess her up, right? That would damage her. So they said, although we have all the evidence in the world, we are going to back off and try to give her a normal life. And that was valid. But what does Woody Allen do? He gets on the steps of the courthouse and he says, I have been redeemed. Everything's clear to go. And then after that, the narrative became that Mia Farrow had lied. Woody is this great director. He's an amazing person. And he went on to make movies for another 20 years before Amazon kicked him out. So it's like, that is a very standard narrative for these guys who are in the media, especially. But in these families that come from like these very traditional families where the man goes to work and the woman stays at home,
Right.
if the man starts abusing the woman, she has no income. She has no means to leave. She has no means for legal protections. And in this case, because there's political corruption, her father is going to side with the man who's hitting her. And so
There's still
it's
that
just,
aspect to it, right? Of like what we talked
yeah,
about, that you and I and Kate on one of those shows,
yeah,
women not being able to get credit cards
yeah,
unless a man signed off on it till what, 1980, whatever it was. And there still is aspect of it, like, I'm handing over this property to you, my daughter, for your, for you
yeah, my
to support
dowry,
our
blah, blah, blah.
family,
Yeah.
and even if that's not literally what it is anymore, there's still this sort of feeling sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the case that proves sort of what you're saying, because she actually, would be one of the few exceptions that wouldn't have, lack access to funds because her dad's
Mm-hmm.
wealthy and all of that. And I mean, he may have not given her
Right.
any, I don't know,
Right.
but the family has funds. and yet it doesn't really matter. Like, there's a guy, he's a congressman, he's making a
Right.
claim and saying she's nuts and she's lying and whatever, and her dad will not speak up for her.
No.
So essentially, it's just becomes her word against the
Right.
congressman's,
Yeah,
and
you
who
throw him
who
on
will be.
camera with his little 3/4 zip and his children's
Yep,
drawings in the background, and guess who's the good guy? She doesn't have a PR team. She doesn't have somebody. Nobody even knows what she looks like,
right.
right? And so we now have this one face wearing his little fleece on screen, looking like, he's a dad, and she's invisible. And all we have is her voice on these recorded calls, which I don't know if he recorded them or she recorded them. But the calls
Not sure
don't
either.
really redeem him. I mean, they really don't redeem him. All they do is say that the thing that she accused him of, he actually did, but he tries to downplay the thing that he did. So far she's batting 100. You
Right,
know.
and then again, like, body language and
Mhm.
everything. I mean, he just looked
Oh yeah,
pulsating
he does a lot of
anger.
this. He does a lot of like this hand
Yes.
motion. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure they
it's gross.
trained him on that to try to seem whatever, but he
Yeah,
even did it in a stiff, angry. I mean, having worked in PR, like, I've seen
I
all this
know.
stuff, and I mean,
Yeah.
he's a
And you
you
can
could
tell
tell.
he's built. You can tell he's like really built. And so it's
Yes.
like, she
He also
probably
probably
doesn't
wanted to
have,
probably
yeah,
punch the camera, it looked. I mean, he just looked menacing. He did not look like someone who
yeah,
was sorry,
yeah,
at all. It did not look like somebody who was trying to defend
yeah.
himself as much as, like, he, had to be there and had to say this
Hmm.
crap instead of doing what he really wanted to do, which was go cause
Yeah,
more violence to. I mean,
right.
and
And
so go ahead.
it's like a
Sorry.
microcosm as we segue. This is a good segue into the Epstein files. It's a microcosm of um, power versus no power, like no power behind you, whether you want to look at that like physically, like men versus young girls, or if you want to look at that like financially and these billionaires against, kids from the sticks. There was something, and not to like beat a dead horse and bring it all back, but like I remember, and it wasn't in the interview that I was in, but I remember Michael Cohen talking about one time when Donald Trump had looked over at his daughter playing tennis, and she was 15 years old, and said, "Ah, check out her. No, look at the legs on that. That is a dish," kind of a thing. And Michael Cohen just kind of brushed it off. Like he just brushed it, like, "Ha ha, sir, that's my daughter," la ha ha. And then when he was interviewed about it later, he said, "That's just a thing. That's just a thing that happens here. Like older men, come on to young girls. They're in the clubs. It's a New York
It's
thing." And I
just a
just
thing.
remember
Maybe
thinking,
it shouldn't be a thing. I don't know.
I would go to jail if somebody said that about my kid. Like, there is
Yeah.
no way I wouldn't go to work the next day. I'd be done. My child would never be in their presence again. There would be repercussions if somebody who was a 50-something-year-old man, 60-something, I don't know how I mean,
However
he's
old he was at the time,
67,
doesn't matter. It's gross.
said that about a 15-year-old child, we would be done. That would be, I mean, it wouldn't be hard. It's not like I'm a great person with high, it's just like a gut response is somebody says that about your child, you're out and you're as far away as
I
possible.
don't understand how that's,
I
like,
just don't,
not a I would hope that's a
yeah,
normal response,
I
right?
would assume so. But then again, we're in this world of money, power, social circles,
Yeah.
where you do see people like Glenn, Glenn and even Duba, and like their children are Epstein's godchildren, whereas Glenn and even know exactly what Epstein was doing the whole time. They have participated in some of those things, and yet they'll sit their little baby children on his laps. Like when you see all these pictures of little kids in the Epstein files whose faces are blacked out, that's all the Dubin's kids. Like they were
Yeah.
all around everything, and then you go back into like now there's the Dubin cancer ward at Mount Sinai Hospital,
Right.
and that Mount
They
Sinai was sending doctors to Epstein's house in the middle of the night to stitch up girls.
they
Like,
whitewash everything. They buy their sort of,
yeah, it's just
their
like this
name on
weird. So
stuff.
nobody is going to stand up for children in general, but nobody was standing up for their own children, which is psychotic. Like I don't understand the instinctive reaction to not protecting your own kids, because it's like, as a human on
Right.
earth who breathes, like I have children, that's the cutoff for me. If I ever felt that there was any threat, I see red, I'm blind, I'm gone, right?
I've said
My
it
head
before,
explodes.
like, and I'll say it again, like, and I don't think I don't always just assume this is like a a normal reaction. I would kill or die for my kids. I mean,
Right.
I'm not saying
Like,
I would
jail
go
is not
I
a
would commit
consequence in my head,
murder.
right?
I'm saying if
Yes.
somebody were threatening my kids in
Yeah.
and violence was how they need to be protected, I would commit acts of
Mm.
violence with no
You
regret.
see it in the news. You see it in the news of parents who are on trial because somebody molested their child and they went in the house and they shot him in the head, right? I mean, I would do the
I
exact same thing. I have
exactly,
no
like, I
problem
may
saying
believe
that.
in the rule of law, and I do, and I don't, in a perfect world,
Yes.
don't want that to happen, yet I fully understand it, and I'd be lying if
Mhm.
I said, "You hurt one of my kids," there's
Yeah.
nothing that I wouldn't do to you.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, and I
Snip off their
just would
balls
think
and light them on fire. I have no
yeah,
problem. I would,
I would think
yeah.
that would be a normal like, that doesn't make
Mhm.
me, I don't think, some kinda
No.
whatever, like, how I mean, that's we're supposed to be programmed that way.
Right. That is
Like, that's
why they
evolution.
created self-defense. If somebody is harming somebody and you protect that somebody, that is why they created the law of self-defense. That is what
Right.
it's for. And there are, foggy areas about how long between the event occurring and somebody going off and blowing someone's head off. But it's,
Right.
it's hard not to justify people who harm children and someone going after them. It's just I
That right. I never advocate violence. I don't think
Mhm.
you ever advocate violence, but I think you any well, again, I don't know how everybody reacts, but I can speak for me. I would be lying if I said I
Mhm.
don't understand it and there
Uh,
wouldn't be a good chance I would do exactly the
right,
same thing.
right. Well,
Like, I mean, your children are just it's different. Like, we're here to protect
yeah.
them. And you
I just
dare like yeah, I mean,
I
I don't
remember during Penn State and that whole ordeal at Penn State where,
yeah,
this coach is abusing boys in the locker rooms. And I remember there was just like this, who was the coach who died in the middle of that, who was like so revered, and then they found out he knew about it the
Paterno,
whole time.
Joe
Yes,
Paterno.
Paterno. Um, and they were just like, why didn't all these men just call the police? Like, why didn't they just call the police? Like, so simple. And I remember thinking, and I think I had one, was that 2012? It was a while ago.
It was a while. I don't
I had
remember what year.
one kiddo at the time, I believe, maybe. And I remember thinking, like, the police, like, if I walked into a locker room and somebody was abusing a child, like, the police would be the last thing that they would be worried about, right? Like, they
I
would be worried about violence at that point
yes.
because, the police are gonna come, but they're gonna take a minute to get there. Like, if I walk in and somebody's hurting a child, I am going to physically get that person off that child by all means necessary. Like, it's such common, evolutionary
It just
response that it's just wild to me that humans exist on Earth who don't react in that way. And is that a money thing? Is that what money does? Is that what that social money club status does to you? Is you become so unempathetic to
I
humanity
think
because
it
it's
does. I think it's the
yeah,
old sort of thing, people always like nature versus nurture. I think that
yeah,
there's like with everything else, there's probably a very, a scale, so to speak, and some people start off
mhm,
with more than others, but I think anybody or not anybody, but many people can become desensitized by being around these kinds of people. But I guess you have to ask yourself the question of who wants to be around these groups of people? Like I ran in the opposite
yeah,
direction when I got stuck with some of them. I mean, I didn't, even as a high school kid and whatever, like I
yeah,
didn't, I don't, I guess maybe right away that's the tell that you want to
yeah,
be in these circles and you want to be around these people, that this
mhm,
is what's important to you. It makes me think of someone like Michael Wolff, when you wrote about him
yeah,
and why he reminded me of so many people I grew up with and wrote that piece because clearly he was not a journalist. He was trying to make
mhm,
lots of money and be around the cool kids, be
yeah,
around the rich people. That's what was important to him. And it was like,
yeah.
you sick fuck
It's
you.
that
Like,
it's
I
the
mean,
high
what is
school mentality of,
yeah,
like, prom, right? The prom queen, prom king, and,
right.
like, most of us let that go when we graduate and we realize, "Oh, that just ended there, and now real life begins." But I think for people in these circles, they're still reaching that high of, because like Donald Trump, his biggest currency is popularity. Like, he likes it more than money. He doesn't if
Oh,
somebody says, "Sir, I like you and you're the greatest," like, that is better than sex for Donald
oh no,
Trump.
he's
Like, that's
admitted it. Like
yeah,
dictators, he likes them when they like him. They all know
that's
that too.
it's
So
it's and so into the Epstein files, like anytime any of these men, mostly men, there were some women, um, could add to their, we call it the proverbial Rolodex, but it's their cell phones, right? When we talk about the list and whatever, it's
Yeah.
somebody's cell phone, right? Where are the cell phones? Anytime they could add somebody into their phone who was of prestige that they could then go to the next guy and go, look who's in my phone. That's all that mattered. That's all they cared about. They
That's
weren't
what I do with
friends. They
Ellie.
weren't like camping together. Yeah, sure.
I'm
But like
sorry,
they
I had
weren't
to make
like
a joke.
going out clubbing. They were just adding these names and then saying that they know someone. And that's half the things you read in these emails, like with Michael Wolff, is like, I can introduce you to so and so. I know so and so. This is what and they don't know each other, but they act like I know this guy so well and I can hook you up. And then that, I know the Saudis, I know this guy, I know that guy. That mattered so much to them that they just lost reality. Like reality was in the rearview window for most of these people, Epstein in particular.
So I'm going to make the quick connection. I don't want to take this away from what we're talking about, but I figure this came up, which is you brought up Glenn and Ava Dubin.
Yeah.
Important to point out that Ava had been Epstein's girlfriend before she met Glenn and married him. I don't know how that worked for them and how they became or Epstein was the godparent or they were godparents, whatever.
Epstein might have been their oldest child's father, but that's another conversation. So
there you go with that. And I'd just like to point out to everybody, in upcoming election, because somehow it's all connected here to Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy's super PAC got $150,000 from Glenn Dubin. So for anybody looking at Amy Acton versus Vivek Ramaswamy, understand, and right now I think it's either considered a toss-up or whatever. Please, God, we need a Democratic governor here. That scumbag Ramaswamy got 150,000. And then
that's crazy that he doesn't like. Speaking of background checks,
exactly.
And then that's a risk he's taking to accept that money. But go on.
Right. And then no, I mean you're right. And then to go back to earlier, Bernie Moreno himself took a bunch of money from Les Wexner, who we all know is basically the guy who was one of the closest to Epstein, who gave Epstein power of attorney over his funds and whatever. So that's important that Bernie Moreno, who we're talking about, father of Emily Moreno, who was abused by Max Miller, this congressman, took a bunch of money from Wexner. They're all connected. That's
and
the
it's
thing
also a proof that none of them are reading the Epstein files. All these people were like fighting for survivors. Nobody's ever read these files. They probably don't even know who Leslie Wexner is. They're not paying attention.
Yep.
And that's the problem.
Yes. So I mean, it like, and that's one of the things I want to talk about. Max Miller. I mean, it's leading the news, and it's despicable and gross and horrible in every way you can imagine. Especially his dad or her dad just throwing her to the wolves for 2 years before the numbers were low enough for Miller to decide to open his damn mouth. But on top of all of that, again, this is in the state where we've got Les Wexner as one of the biggest of the Epstein types. This is, in up north from here, not all that far away, you could say, from Ohio State, where Wexner obviously has his name on stuff where Epstein was very much involved with, I think, paying off professors we discussed. And of course, Jim Jordan was a coach on the wrestling team where, just like what you said at Penn State, a number of young men and boys were molested by the team doctor.
Yes.
And Jim Jordan we've had 4 or 5 people now say, including 1 or 2 under oath, that Jim Jordan knew exactly what was happening, including one of the other coaches and a ref and a couple of wrestlers, and nothing has happened to Jim Jordan. I mean, Jim Jordan, Max Miller, Bernie Moreno, the only
Ohio is sketchy.
We are fucked.
No offense. No offense.
I mean, shit. Like I grew up in New York, East Coast. I thought that was bad. My wife's family from Cincinnati moved here, and I was like, so far, none of these people no, fuck. Vivek Ramaswamy is from here, and so is JD Vance. God damn it. That upsets me.
Ohio is so enmeshed. We talk about Zorro Ranch all the time, and people are up in arms. No one's investigating Zorro. Ohio is an Epstein state. Like Ohio was and is run by Leslie Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein is dead. but it is the money of Ohio as a state and its college institutions, and back to like these files that we're reading from the 80s about survivors from the 80s. It's Ohio.
It is.
Ohio is Leslie Wexner has a compound in Ohio. It is where Epstein had a house. Do people
Yep.
know Epstein had a house there? No. Has it ever been investigated? No. It's where Maria Farmer was abused. Nobody talks about it.
I can tell
Nobody's
you,
gone
if you
there.
drive around Columbus, Ohio, which is about an hour and a
Mhm.
half north of here, northeast of where I am in Cincinnati, like, I mean, there's so many things named Wexner. I mean, I guess they've just started
Uh-huh.
trying to take names off of different things, but I mean, it is
Right.
everywhere, that name. I mean, you have to understand, and, again, like in a place like Ohio versus, again, where I grew up in New York City or I lived in Philly and
Hmm.
DC or whatever, there may be, I don't know how many now, but when I moved, here 15 years ago, however many years ago, there were maybe 4 or 5 billionaires in the state, which I'm not
Hmm.
saying is bad, like good. The fewer billionaires, the better. But I think what my point is that there are a lot of billionaires in New York City. So when you're one of them, when one of your billionaires is as gross as Wexner and doing what he did,
Hmm.
then that's enough to turn Ohio
Yeah.
into the type of state that he turned it into,
Yes. In
because he has so much power here, having that kind of money.
Yeah. In New York, there's just a lot of everything. So if there's going to be bad stuff, there's going to be a lot of it. There's going to be billionaires. There's going to be a lot of them. There's a lot of, big industries. They tend to be corrupt. There's a lot of finance. They tend to be corrupt. Like everything is in New York.
Right.
It's everything. It's everybody from all over the world. It's like a global little tiny version of Earth. But when you go to Ohio, it's not that, right? I mean,
No,
it has cities, but it's a
they're
farming state. It's
medium-sized
like,
cities and
right,
small
it's
cities, and yeah,
yes, it's where people go so they can have more and they can have more power as somebody who's a billionaire. So you have Leslie Wexner who owned L Brand, so he owned Victoria's Secret, he owned what are all the other
yep.
companies? Abercrombie and Fitch, like all these
The
massive
limited
brands,
was the yeah.
the limited, like he owned everything. He goes to Ohio. He and Epstein, if you actually do some really digging, some deep digging into New Albany, which is a town in Ohio, they
Yeah.
owned, the two of them ran and owned this town. It's sketchy. I've never been there. I've heard that it's a little Stepford and a little uncomfortable and a little weird.
I've been
But they
there, and
literally,
it's all of those things. I mean, it's an upper middle class to upper class
yes.
area. It's yeah.
Yes. And so you have that, and you had the control that they had, which included law enforcement. And then you have Wexner and Epstein living right outside, in an unincorporated whatever, in this compound that looks like the White House. I mean, he had created this massive compound that, you know, we talk. Thankfully, Wexner is still got his marbles, but I mean, he lies through his teeth. But he's not like somebody with dementia. They didn't wheel him in a wheelchair. They didn't use all their tools that they could have in their tool belt. But his wife was there the whole time, and she is much, much, much younger than he is. They had all this stuff happening on their property. And if you listen to like Maria Farmer's story, she said, they had these massive, like, I think they were like Israeli security guards, like IRA, not IRA, what am I thinking?
Oh, IDF.
Yeah, like these big, big dudes. And she said it wasn't to keep people off the property, it was to keep people from getting out of the house who were in the house. And so she couldn't leave and she would
God,
have to ask
I mean, I didn't mean to
permission.
that was more of
It's
an
messy. It's messy,
yeah.
but like she was in the house. She was there, like, she was an adult, but she was very young. She was like their art procurer, and they wanted her to come out there and just do art for a summer on their property. And she couldn't leave their house unless she was given permission to go out the front door. And then eventually, she locked herself in a bathroom, called her dad, and wouldn't leave, and her dad came and picked her up. um, you know, None of that's been investigated. Like
Right.
nobody has gone out to their house and gone like, oh, we need to actually follow through and see what happened here. Everybody forgets that it exists, but it's like he has control
Yep.
over an entire state. He has
Well, so that
all
was
the
the point I
academic
was
industry.
trying to make, right, Ellie? And that was
Mhm.
kind of it, because I don't know if I made it clearly before. I wasn't sort of saying, I wish we had more billionaires here because, blah, blah, blah.
No, I know
The point
they
was
have more
simply
power.
that there are so many billionaires or
Mhm.
people of similar wealth in New York that you're not a big deal if you're that. I mean,
Yeah.
like you actually have to have like 50 billion
You
or,
have to be a good billionaire, right?
Right.
Like it's why Harvey Weinstein went to jail, because he was rich, but he wasn't rich enough, right?
Right. Whereas Wexner here, even I don't remember how much, even if you had $2 or $3 billion, like in Ohio, that makes you either the richest or one of the 3 or 4 richest people in the entire state. And
Yeah.
so if you're evil on top of that, as he is, then there's so much
Yeah.
you can corrupt, as you're pointing out, because you can own towns, you can own cops, you can own judges, you can, it's not to say you can't in New York, but you're competing with other people that have more money and you know, and that kind of thing. So I mean, none of that's good, and none of these people should have that much money in my
so
world.
he has $11 billion, so he's probably near the top.
Yeah, he's got to be like, and there's a couple, there's 1 or 2 good families that happen to have a ton of money, and there's a few that are just terrible in this state. That so that is their story. I think actually we're gonna have to end soon
Yeah,
because
we gotta
I
pop
have
off.
a very different live with Ivo Dalder. I'm probably mispronouncing his name, and I feel like an asshole. Who's the former NATO ambassador under Obama, and I'm kind of excited. This should be really interesting.
Awesome.
So that's coming up at 2. You're going on with folks too, aren't you? At 2?
Yeah, I'm going on with Matt Robinson and Glenn Kirshner at 2:00. So
look at all of us just running
we can
off.
bounce back and forth.
Yeah.
We'll be hanging out.
Otherwise, you and I usually go like, you know,
I know, we
long
go
on
long.
these things.
We didn't even cover the things that I could have covered. We will cover more, because there is so much going on in the Epstein files right now. There's all that. I just ask people to continue to pay attention to Katie Fang's lawsuit, because she could be the thing, not to call Katie Fang a thing. She could be the person who actually gets some accountability, because she's chipping away at this case very, very brilliantly. And what I'm trying to do, which is kind of like going back to my core of what I started Substack as, is taking these things that are happening, that are sort of legalese in these court documents, and what happened with Todd Blanche this week, and making it completely logical for every person to be able to read and understand, and not do it in 5,000 words, right? Like, do it in bite-sized pieces, so they can go, oh, that's what happened this week. Oh, he is an asshole. Okay, now I get it. This is why. But keep paying attention to Katie, because she could be our key to actually finding some justice in this case, little by little. So pay attention.
Yes. I think that is exactly right. Somebody asked here, I guess we have to, is Leon Black testifying?
He's supposedly going to testify. Well, he gave one of these sort of, House oversight interviews that that are not under oath, that everybody's been doing. It's the new thing, nouveau. But he was so defiantly against answering their questions that they subpoenaed him in the middle of the interview, and now he has to go under oath. So supposedly, yes.
And then we've got John Welch here, who's from Ohio. He's been in these things where Dave Yost suddenly quit the Ohio AG job. Dave Yost has been a longtime scumbag who enabled the private, like the for-profit education, people that ripped off our state. Like, he's just a complete, he's a complete shitheel who's been wanted to be governor and whatever. He was the Delaware County. Now that's up in that area of Columbus, DA near Wexner before. So John's asking if there's a connection there, and there could be. Because as Ellie pointed out, Ohio has disproportionately been Epsteinized or Wexnerized. It's gross. And so who knows what may come out of all of this. I say that the vast majority of these people have they're guilty. So as far as I'm concerned, if they were not involved, they're accessories that knew what was going on and turned a blind eye to it. And that's at best. So
best.
Yeah.
Wexner, not so much. Wexner needs to go to jail for the last few years of his life. And
yes, he does.
Sit in jail.
So we will come back to this next week. I appreciate you guys being here. I need to go talk. I mean, NATO, pretty important stuff. Ellie needs to go talk with Matt and Glenn about more legal and Epstein matters. So that's pretty important stuff. And we will see you back here next week, probably, hopefully, our regular time, and with Kate joining us, she had other things she had to take care of at 12 next Tuesday, losing track of the day.
Yes.
So take care, folks. And as the sun sets slowly in the west, we bid you a fond farewell.
Bye, guys.
Bye.